My father and I, we didn't always see eye to eye, but there was one profound truth we both held sacred. When an opportunity to do something truly good presented itself, you seized it. Now, at 63 years old, Nell Newman is finally ready for an interview that Hollywood never dreamed would see the light of day. For countless decades, her father, the legendary Paul Newman, and her mother, the brilliant Joanne Woodward, were revered as the ultimate golden couple. Theirs was a love story so seemingly perfect, it appeared utterly immune to the scandals that so often plague the famous. But as Nell adjusts the microphone, a long, heavy silence hangs in the air before she speaks, her voice barely a whisper. "There are things about my family that were never what they appeared to be." Those haunting words sent shockwaves not just through the room, but across the annals of history, because behind every glamorous magazine cover, every star-studded charity gala, and every flawless red carpet smile, there were whispers, insidious rumors of a secret apartment in New York. Rumors of clandestine meetings, of unsigned documents holding explosive secrets, and of one particular relationship so powerful it could have shattered their entire world, if the devastating truth had ever been revealed. For the very first time, Paul Newman's own daughter is breaking her silence. She is here to confirm the shocking rumors that will forever redefine one of Hollywood's most cherished legends, exposing the truth that lay hidden inside the family. To the adoring public, the Newmans were living an absolute fairy tale, a magnificent estate in Westport, Connecticut, a home filled with laughter, unending success, and the radiant glow of Hollywood's most beloved couple. But behind those closed doors, the silence was deafening, speaking volumes louder than any standing ovation. Nell vividly recalls the long, empty mornings when her father was simply gone. No one ever dared to ask where he was. The question was too dangerous. Her mother, the ever-resilient Joanne Woodward, heroically kept their home running and managed her own formidable acting career. She was desperately trying to hold the fractured family together. The immense strain was undeniable, while she was a picture of elegance in public. At home, a deep, soul-crushing exhaustion was etched in her eyes. For years, Nell simply accepted this as the heavy price of fame, until she stumbled upon something, a discovery so profound it would shatter her perception of her father forever. In the spring of 1970, while searching for old family photographs, Nell unearthed a receipt carefully tucked inside a movie script. It was a formal lease document for a small, anonymous apartment on 78th Street in Manhattan. The property was registered under a cryptic shell company, one linked to one of Paul Newman's film projects. The family never, ever spoke of it, not a single word. But then, 20 years later, the Observer magazine unleashed an explosive investigation, linking that very same address to a series of unlisted private meetings. These meetings were between Newman and a tight-knit group of his closest friends in the film industry. When relentless reporters pressed the family for answers, they offered only a cold, resounding no comment. For Nell, that deafening silence screamed the truth. The man the world idolized as the perfect husband had, for decades, masterfully lived a double life, with one foot planted firmly outside their home, in a secret world none of his family was ever permitted to enter. Back then, it wasn't a public scandal, it was a deeply buried secret, a painful truth that everyone in the family tacitly agreed to pretend they couldn't see. The relationships that thrived beyond the spotlight. As Nell painstakingly continued to piece together the shattered fragments of her father's private existence, she began to see chilling patterns emerge. Certain people appeared again and again, like ghosts in his personal notes, and meticulously kept travel logs. Paul Newman had, for years, maintained unusually intimate relationships with a select circle of male artists, chief among them the brilliant screenwriter Gore Vidal and the acclaimed director George Roy Hill. Publicly, they were simply creative collaborators, but behind the scenes, their connections ran profoundly deeper. Between the pivotal years of 1969 and 1982, Paul embarked on numerous unannounced journeys to New York, Rome, and even Stockholm, always conspicuously without his family, and always, without fail, accompanied by at least one member of that enigmatic inner circle. The receipts, discovered among his archived personal belongings, tell a story of their own. Even more damning were the hotel bookings, confirmed under cryptic initials instead of full names, alongside tantalizing handwritten notes that whispered of clandestine meetings, dinner with G, same suite. When confronted by journalists about these shocking entries, Nell refused to speculate, offering instead a chillingly simple explanation. "My father cherished his privacy more than anyone I have ever known," she stated, "but he also lived a life of dual rhythms. There was the public icon, and then there was the man who desperately wanted to vanish." The next clue wasn't a whisper, but a tangible piece of evidence, unearthed while sifting through her mother's most private papers. There, Nell uncovered a typed letter, starkly marked, "Private, not for distribution," a document that shockingly referenced her father's life insurance policy. And on it, an additional beneficiary was listed, a male name completely unknown to the family. Absolutely no one could place the identity behind this mysterious figure. While the document was quietly swept into the archives, for Nell, it was another undeniable thread in a tapestry of secrets she was now determined to unravel. The picture-perfect family portrait was fracturing, and through those deep cracks, a devastating truth was beginning to bleed through a story of family tragedy and bitter legal battles. But before the courtroom dramas, before the foundation disputes, there was the original heartbreak. Scott, Paul Newman's only son. He was charming, undeniably talented, yet crushed by a last name far too heavy to bear. Scott grew up lost in the colossal shadow of his father's fame, desperately trying his hand at acting, music, and even racing. But every single achievement was inevitably measured against Paul's legendary status. By the late 1970s, that immense pressure had tragically curdled into self-destruction. At the tragically young age of 28, Scott's life was cut short by a drug overdose in Los Angeles. For Nell, this was the shattering moment she first understood that something was profoundly broken behind the flawless public facade. Before he died, Scott told me one sentence that has haunted me ever since. Nell would later recall. He said, "Dad lives two lives, one for the world and one for himself." After that devastating admission, a suffocating silence fell over their home. Years later, that same chilling silence would return, this time shrouding the controversy over Paul Newman's will, when the icon passed away in 2008. His staggering estate, valued in the hundreds of millions, was almost entirely bequeathed to the Newman's own foundation, a truly unbelievable move. This left his own family with virtually no control. Initially, Nell accepted this outcome, trusting it was a true reflection of her father's final wishes. But then, in 2020, a bombshell. New documents surfaced, revealing glaring and disturbing inconsistencies between the 2006 draft of the will and the final 2008 version. Witness names had been mysteriously swapped, entire clauses had vanished, and even Paul's own signature appeared alarmingly faint and unsteady. Court filings would later paint a heartbreaking picture. During his final months, Paul was heavily medicated and alarmingly dependent on a tight circle of advisors, a small circle composed of legal advisors and the foundation's own executives, the very individuals who stood to gain immense power from these last-minute changes. In a desperate bid for justice, Nell and her sisters filed a petition in Connecticut's Superior Court, alleging outright manipulation and questioning their father's mental clarity. The case was shockingly dismissed, but for Nell, this was never about the money. It was a crusade for the truth. One son had already been lost to the silence. A father's true legacy was now imprisoned behind legal firewalls, and a daughter was left relentlessly searching for answers. The turning point, the moment the whispers became a roar, would finally arrive in 2025. It was during a landmark exclusive interview on CBS Sunday Morning that Nell Newman finally, and publicly, confronted the two colossal questions that had haunted her family for decades. Her answers, concerning both the contested will and the persistent whispers, would forever reshape the legacy of one of Hollywood's most revered and beloved men. First, she tackled the explosive issue of the will. According to Nell, the final version, signed in July of 2008, a mere 6 weeks before Paul Newman's death, was absolutely nothing like the original draft from 2006. That earlier, authentic document had been witnessed by his wife, Joanne Woodward, and two of their own daughters. The final version, however, bore only the signature of a lawyer and, most tellingly, that of Robert Forrester, the CEO of the Newman's own foundation. It was only after her father's passing that the family made the devastating discovery: complete control of the multi-million-dollar foundation had been wrested from them and transferred entirely to an external board. Then, in a bombshell report from 2019, the Wall Street Journal uncovered that Forrester had been present at no fewer than 4 clandestine meetings with Newman. This occurred during the darkest days of his cancer battle, a harrowing period when medical records shockingly detailed a mind in turmoil, with fluctuating cognition and a tragically impaired short-term memory. Nell herself declared, with a heavy heart, "We are not pointing fingers, but the documents powerfully suggest my father was not fully aware when he put his signature on that final version." But then came the second, earth-shattering revelation, one that left even the most seasoned journalists utterly breathless. Nell courageously confirmed that her father, the iconic Paul Newman, had for years maintained a deeply committed romantic relationship with another man. "This isn't some sordid scandal," she stated with quiet dignity. "It is simply a profound truth that was never allowed to be told." The undeniable proof was locked away in the Newman family archives, a treasure trove donated to Yale University in 2017, which held heartbreakingly personal handwritten letters and intimate Polaroid photographs between Newman and Arthur Siegel. Siegel was a celebrated photographer and an Esquire editor who had worked side by side with Paul on multiple film campaigns from the 1960s all the way through the 1980s. These materials were not mere speculation. They were meticulously authenticated by top experts at the Yale Manuscripts Library. One letter, dated September 12, 1978, contained a stunning confession. "You know," he wrote, "I'll never admit this to another living soul, but you understand. When I'm with you, I feel a freedom more real than anything I ever portrayed on screen." When pressed on why the family had guarded this secret for so long, Nell's reply was chilling. Because in his time, even the faintest whisper could have utterly annihilated a man's entire career. "We knew," she confessed. "We just made the choice not to let the world turn his truth into a weapon." In a matter of days, a media firestorm erupted, with Vanity Fair and The Guardian leading the charge. The Los Angeles Times and others frantically dug into their archives, desperately cross-referencing Nell's explosive claims against their own historical records. The verdict was unanimous. The evidence was irrefutable, aligning perfectly with everything already known. As the interview drew to a close, Nell leaned in, her voice unwavering and resolute. "I am not here to defend him or to condemn him. I just want the world to finally see the man he truly was, a soul full of complexity and conflict, but one who was always fighting to live by his own truth." Two monumental truths, buried for decades, had finally been unearthed, and with their revelation, the flawless myth of perfection that Hollywood had fiercely guarded for half a century finally began to shatter. In the end, one thing remains absolutely certain. Paul Newman was, and forever will be, a titan of the silver screen. He was undeniably one of the greatest actors of the 20th century, a man whose piercing blue eyes became a legendary symbol of American cinema. His voice resonated with both impossible charm and unshakable conviction, and his foundation transformed millions of lives through its incredible charity. And yet, as his own daughter so bravely revealed, a legacy is never a simple story. Behind the gleaming trophies, the celebrated philanthropy, and the worldwide adoration, there lies a labyrinth of questions that even time itself has not dared to answer. Who was the real Paul Newman when the cameras finally stopped rolling? And what was the unimaginable price he paid to exist as both a living legend and a mortal man? And what, truly, was the cost of living a life as both an immortal icon and a fragile human being?